Let's get down to Imperial Rome. Other videos have dealt with kind of Rome as a republic or Rome and its culture, even the economics of Rome. But at the heart of Rome and the story we know of with Rome is Imperial Rome. We tend to talk about them as a republic and also talk about them as being of their height. But they will not actually reach this size until they become an imperial institution, or at least are well on their way. Plenty of you know the story of Julius Caesar and Pompey and the first triumvirate and murder of Caesar by 23 different senators who, in making the statement, are actually saying that it is the Senate and therefore the people who are taking power back from Caesar. But you also may be mistaken in the fact that he was an emperor. He never was. He had declared himself dictator for life. It was a legitimate position that had lasted for 700 years at this point, in which power was temporarily given over to an individual to have full power in times of war and need. This happened a lot of times, like the Punic War, but it was always given back. Cincinnatus is kind of the famous kind of example. The real story we have to deal with is actually what comes next. It is Augustus himself who is the first emperor. This is in the wake of the death of Caesar and the rise of the second triumvirate and the coming to power of Octavian, who will take on the title of Augustus Caesar. This is going to be the rise of Rome. You are going to have specific individuals who will lead and control armies, focus more or at least as much on expansion as they had before. And for the first 150 years, these emperors ruled alongside the Senate. So we're still dealing with a republic. Augustus himself and others who follow will actually give more people, not just the patricians, not just the born to the higher ranks of society power. He will give others the ability to have a voice. Any democratic reforms did not happen in the age of the Republic. They happened in the age of the Empire, which is where everything is already controlled by a single individual as opposed to the Senate. So it's an odd thing. What we will see is that after Augustus, you will have a series of people: Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, and then the various Flavian rulers, which will lead up to about 96, when you have what is considered the five good emperors. That's from, say, 96 to about 180 is the height of Rome, when they've reached its most expanse, when they have as much wealth coming in. We call it Pax Romana, or Roman peace. It's not really peaceful. They're actually at war quite a bit, but the interior of Rome is successful. Of course, this is Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antonius, Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. Please note that Trajan and Hadrian actually are not even Roman. They are Spaniards. That through this kind of concept of Latin Rite and becoming citizenship through service in the military, they're going to inspire loyalty to the Roman army. But what these guys and their predecessors that I mentioned all did is chose their successors. They actually turned it over to the most worthy. None of these guys and the ones before them will pass it on directly to their sons. They may pass it to a nephew, they may pass it to a young general who is following, but they choose the best, which means you have to earn your way to get there. You have to go through all of this. But that will not be the case with Marcus Aurelius. Despite being claimed as one of the greatest scholars or philosophers of the era, he will leave his to his son, a guy named Commodus. Maybe we can get a little insight here by actually looking at two famous pieces of art, because I think that is what tells us most about this imperial age. This is Augustus and Marcus Aurelius, the first and the last of these emperors. And both of these, please understand, are images that they would have approved, that they chose to be depicted in the way these are, which means it says a lot about how they see themselves. We start with Augustus, and some attributes to point out. First of all, he's wearing armor. He's the armor of a soldier, not a leader or a senator or a sage, which means he's trying to indicate a sense of strength and power. But he still has these robes around his waist, showing that he is part of the senatorial class and that he is not only patrician, but a learned man. He's trying to give those dual impressions. There's this little cherub down here, which is a symbol of the gods. This is giving the approval of the gods to him. He holds not a sword, but instead he holds this staff. This is the staff of someone who would sit in judgment. A king would render a verdict. He or someone else would take this staff, slam it into the ground, announcing that decision. It has become a gavel today. Note he's pointing forward and stepping forward, this idea that we are moving forward to this new age, this inspiring, we are going forward. We see that with politicians all the time. Even though he was older, I should say, he would depict himself as young, and he is consciously making a choice to be barefoot, implying this connection that he is rooted to the ground, that he is a man of the people, he is one of you all. This is clearly a person who is attempting politicize and campaign for himself. Now, he doesn't have to campaign. This is not an election scenario. Feel the need to actually promote himself and justify himself. Because, of course, he took the power through strength. That means he's vulnerable to the next guy. We move to Marcus Aurelius, 207 years approximately later, and his interpretation of himself is very different. He is, of course, wearing sandals. He is off the ground. He is on a horse. He doesn't feel the need to be grounded in one of the people. He's choosing to depict himself as older, right? He doesn't feel the need to make himself kind of youthful. In fact, his robes are his outfit. There is no military involved, which is odd because Marcus Aurelius spent more years and time at war than any other emperor in Roman history. And yet, he is trying to depict himself as maybe scholarly. Oh, still the pointed motion, still the going forward. Don't miss that. So when we look at these two, what we see is two very different Romes, personified in the image of its leaders. One who is a transitional creation to a new type of government, trying to inspire the people, feeling a need to inspire the people. Another is an emperor who feels comfortable in his own position and seems to have nothing to prove. And that moment seems to mark what comes next. Because Marcus Aurelius' son, Commodus, will actually depict himself. Although Commodus did not rule for an extremely long time, was killed in a plot by his advisors, killed by his wrestling coach. He chose to have himself depicted. Now, he's wearing the cowl of the Nittany lion, he has the club, and he has apples in his hand. If you're not familiar with the symbolism, he is depicting himself as Heracles, or in Rome they call it Hercules. He is literally, in his official image, depicting himself as a Greek demigod. After this, we will see the Severan dynasty, and we will see emperors who simply inherit the throne or inherit the position as opposed to work for it. We'll see a lack of the best rising to power, much of the searching for leadership, especially in Eastern Rome or the Byzantium, once the empire splits into two, will be a matter of constant warfare for power. And this internal strife and lack of desire to focus on the rest of the empire and the expansion of the empire, many will argue will lead to the downfall of Rome. But you can read more about that in your textbook.